Hello, White Sox fans. It is Chrystal O'Keefe back with episode 11 now of Visiting Dugout, brought to you by the Southside Sox, a part of the Fans First Sports Network. Today on the show, I have Wick from Red Reporter and Walks Will Haunt podcast to talk about the Reds. So, Wick, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Wick Terrell. I'm from redreporter.com over on the SB Nation Network. I've written there off and on for 12 years now, I guess. And I've been kind of the lead writer there since like 2014 and managing editor there for the last 6-ish years. I don't know. The last couple of years of Reds baseball have kind of turned into a big gob of the same story over and over again. But we used to have the Red Reporter podcast on pretty regular basis. Took a little hiatus during their initial rebuild season of 2022 because we literally ran out of things we wanted to talk about at that point in time. But with the advent of Fans First Sports Network, we decided to rebrand ourselves and get back into the game. And so that's where Walks Will Haunt came from, and that's where we'll continue to be over there and trying to do our best to follow what the Reds are up to. So
yeah, I feel you on that. Walks Will Haunt. I say it every time that the first walk, first pitch, it's just brutal.
It always is. Always is. It never fails.
All right. So the Reds right now are sitting just above the Cardinals in the National League Central with a record of 12-15. Obviously, the Pirates and the Brewers seem kind of relentless right now. So do you think it's kind of a tough climb to at least pass the Cubs?
I do. I certainly do, just in theory. I don't foresee this Reds team being the kind of team that even if things break absolutely as good as they possibly can be, that they're going to add anything at all during the summer. They're just not there yet. This team was not built to do that. Even if they surprise a little bit, I'm not sure they want to do that. They are in it for the very, very long term. They've been shedding money left and right. I think there's some good young talent on this team. And I think, like they have the last week or so, obviously taking 2 out of 3 in Oakland is nice, but that's not something you should be terribly proud of at this point, I don't think. But sweeping the Texas Rangers at home, that was big. That was a big series. And they made some waves and came back in ways that I didn't expect. I don't know if they knew they could do that at that point, but they're, hopefully building upon that. I think they could chase the Cubs, at least for the first 100-ish games of the season. I just think the Cubs are going to be adding at the deadline, and I think that's going to make a big difference for how the last 50, 60 games go for this season. But, the Reds are hopefully going to make some noise in the National League Central. But, keeping the Cardinals down below them would be great. I would love to have that be the storyline going forward this year. But I don't think they're going to be able to catch the trio of the Brewers, first off, who I think are the class of the division, and Pittsburgh, who've been surprising and outplayed the Reds 5 times already this year.
Yeah, the Pirates have been on a crazy run. But hey, you brought up, you beat the Rangers at home, and they are on top of their game right now too. So that's an impressive win.
That was good. And they came back from a 5-run deficit and then a 6-run deficit and then one on a walk-off right after that. And it could not have been a better series for drama in that regard. Of course, that all came after what I'm already blanking on a 6-game losing streak, I think, for the Reds. So there's going to be a lot of that. I mean, it's a young team. They don't really know who's supposed to be their star yet. They don't really know who's supposed to be their kind of anchor, either in the rotation also. So it's they're going to have some spurts. They've got a lot of first-round picks on the team that have a lot of talent, a lot of reason why they should have trust in them. But there's also going to be a whole lot of lulls, so to speak. We've already seen a couple of them to start the season.
Yeah. So are you not feeling really optimistic about kind of where they're going to be sitting mid-season and then again in September?
I'm more excited about September than I am mid-season. And that's purely because of what they've done on the farm. Their AAA lineup right now is absolutely stacked, frankly. Ellie De La Cruz is pretty consensus top 5 prospect in the game. He missed the first week and a half of AAA season with, I think it was a hamstring injury, but he's back. Christian Encarnacion Strand, it was a big piece they got from the Twins, and the Tyler Mahle deal last summer was their best hitter all spring long. He also was injured and missed some time, but he's already, I think, homered 4 times in like 5 or 6 games since being back healthy at AAA. Matt McClain, former first-round pick, has probably hit better than both of them already, and he's on the cusp to come up also. So there are certainly some reinforcements coming for the Reds, and they haven't gotten Joey Votto back yet either, and he's going to be a part of this at some point down the stretch this year, hopefully healthy after 2 major surgeries this offseason. So, I mentioned they're not going to go out and trade for anybody at the deadline to get better, but there are some pieces that at least should make them more exciting down the stretch for the second half of the season. I still think that's maybe like seriously optimistically a 72 to 74 win team, but one that should at least have a lot of intrigue to it when you watch them.
At least bounce back between 3 and 4.
Yes, that'd be nice. That'd be nice. Yes, not last for the first time in a while would be nice. Yes,
exactly. You brought up Joey Votto. That is actually one of the things I was going to talk to you about. But first, in a perfect world, there's an MVP candidate on the Reds. Who is it?
Wow. I would like to think a healthy Jonathan India would be that guy. He was a 4-win player 2 years ago and won Rookie of the Year, and he should have. He had a tremendous year. He's a guy, especially now with the new rules and the bigger bases, should be a legitimate 2020 threat, if not 25 threat when you factor in playing in Great American Ballpark as small as it is. Good on base threat, and is showing. I think our worries this particular year were that he wasn't the best defender at second base, and without shifting, how would that work? He's actually looked pretty good over there so far. So I think that would probably be the guy. I don't know if he's got it in him to up his game enough to make that leap, but strange BABIP years happen. If he got one of those, maybe he could. Either way, he's a really good player. I think that's the case, and I think he's showing so far this year that his struggles last year were purely because he had terrible hamstrings the entire season and missed a lot of time with it, and it really was debilitating for his entire game. But 2023 so far looks a lot more like 2021 than it did 2022, and if that's the case, that's a really good foundational piece player.
Yeah, I was so bummed. I was there at Great American Ballpark last summer when the Mets were in town, and Joey Votto had been scratched, and Jonathan India, I think he got injured during the game, if I'm remembering correctly. So I was like, well, I was looking forward to those two the most.
Yeah, I mean, for as bad as things were last year for the Reds, they lost 100 games, which they've been around for 100 and however many years and never done that. There were a lot of injuries for last year. I mean, they were going to be bad, and they were actively shedding players midseason like Luis Castillo and Malley, and got rid of Sonny Gray and Eugenio Suarez. The list goes on and on. They were supposed to be bad last year, but even with that factored in, a lot of the guys that they were banking on to be kind of the present and the future, Jonathan India, front and center of that, just had terrible injury years. Tyler Stevenson had 2 concussions and a broken thumb and a broken collarbone on a foul ball and missed 100 games also. They were supposed to be better than they were last year, but they were still, going to be embarking on the rebuild. The hope is we're seeing that play out a little bit more this year, and that while still not actively trying to contend and still not with the open wallet behind them to help back them, that there's going to be some better play from the players that are still around. And knock on wood, I think we're seeing that so far. Well, it is the end of April. We saw that in April officially.
So going back to Joey Votto, obviously he started the season on the injured list as he's recovering from those surgeries to repair the rotator cuff and the bicep. That was back in August. Mm-hmm. Has there been any update with his rehab or like when he might return? Because last I checked, it was still kind of just up in the air.
Yeah, I think it's still kind of up in the air. I was talking about India and Stevenson last year. Votto, the same way. I mean, he has seen his season ended early in August, but he was playing hurt all year long. Mm-hmm. And the guy who mercifully bounced back very, very well in 2021 and hit 36 home runs and 940-ish OPS. The guy that we've gotten used to see over the last 15 years just was never right last year. And so I think there's kind of a mutual agreement between he and the Reds that they don't want him back fighting through things the way that he was last year. He says he's healthy, and I believe him in that regard because he's always been, part of the reason why I write about the Reds and have for so long is I've got a chance to cover Joey Votto, which it's awesome because he's the most frank and open guy when you ask him any of these questions. He doesn't want to play unless he's right. And, even if he's healthy, that doesn't mean he's got the experience and the day-to-day wear and tear and how to wake up sore the next day and adjust your swing accordingly. All those things are still kind of getting worked out. So he started the season at AAA, got his almost full rehab stint in, and the Reds basically brought him back because he wasn't going to be ready to be activated at that point. They didn't want to just send him down to AAA and have him play for 3 months down there either. So he's in Cincinnati. He's working out with the team. He's in the dugout for home games.
Mm-hmm.
I think he will probably be back at some point in May, but there's still been no definitive note about any of that just yet. So, it's frustrating on a number of different levels because A, it's Joey Votto, but B, it's also his last guaranteed year on under contract with the Reds. And, you want to see as much of him as you possibly can before that contract expires. But I also think he's doing his best to make sure that he doesn't become a distraction for such a young and rebuilding team that's kind of looking for its identity. He doesn't want to kind of roll back in there until he knows A, that he can hit and contribute, but also B, that he's not going to be necessarily the biggest story on the active roster for how they're playing. He'll be the biggest story when he gets activated, but that he doesn't have to walk right in and rescue things. He wants them to kind of be able to figure out things themselves. But I would anticipate, hopefully by the end of May, we will see him back.
He's also not getting any younger. He'll be 40 this year. So those injuries, I know that as you get older, they're not as easy to heal.
I hit 40 as well. And it's every morning you wake up and find out what it is you did yesterday that you shouldn't have done. So I'll verify that.
I just went to the chiropractor actually over the weekend, and he was like, oh my gosh, this is just so tight. What are you doing? And I was like, I don't know, walking my dog.
The usual. I'm doing the usual. It just doesn't work the same anymore. Yeah.
Just type in. He's like, well, that's awful here. It's like, all right, well, thank you. I'm closer to 40 than I want to admit. So hush. With Votto, though, how crucial do you think he is to the everyday lineup once he's back, if he's kind of back at that full power?
I think he can still be good. I mean, we saw Nelson Cruz last night be the oldest player to homer and steal a base since God knows when. I think Votto showed that he's still got something left in the tank. I mean, who knows if he's going to be an MVP again? I doubt that. I mean, even in the 2021 season that we're hoping was the exception and not the rule, he still had his defensive limitations that he's not. I think he's 17 shy of 100 stolen bases for his career. I don't think he's going to get there, even with the new rules. So there are aspects of his game that I don't think are necessarily going to ever come back. But the pitch recognition's there. The swing change was the biggest note, I think, for us, is that in 2021, actually the end of the 2020 shortened season was when he put that in place. And the way he finished 2020 and then all the way through 2021, even when he broke a finger and missed a month, still hit 36 home runs. It's not the same juice ball it was a couple years ago, but still, I think his on-base ability and the new swing, if the surgery works, and there's no guarantee any of that is going to work, I think there's still enough left in the tank. I think for him also, I don't think he's ready to retire, despite the fact that this is his last guaranteed year. I think he wants to be able to be back and right to showcase himself, and whether it's good enough for the Reds to say, yeah, we'll pick up that option instead of buying you out for $7-ish million or whatever it is. I think he wants to play still somewhere and be good enough in a limited stretch down this, end of this season to get that. And so I think he's actively, preparing to show that he's still got something left. And I think he's the kind of player that wouldn't wait this long if he didn't think he still had something left, if that makes sense. Because, you could ride out the string, not that Miguel Cabrera deserves anything other than a Hall of Fame induction when he gets, 5 years eligible, but he's played out the string this year. That's kind of how he wants to do it. I don't think Votto's there yet. And I think that's pretty telling.
Yeah, that's fair. Speaking of, now we're going to kind of transition to your younger players. Hunter Greene recently inked a 6-year contract, $53 million. Guaranteed through 2028 season. It includes a $21 million club option and a $2 million buyout for 2029. So again, at 23, seems like a great contract. He does seem to be your ace. His ERA is actually pretty good, 2.89 in 28 innings just from this year. So how do you feel about this contract? And is there anyone else that you feel like the Reds really need to work on to extend?
Yeah, I think, when he was drafted second overall, if I remember correctly at the time, he had the highest draft bonus ever. He got the highest bonus despite going second that year. I think it's like 7.2-ish million that's since been surpassed. But he's been, the present and future of the Reds for a while now. Had Tommy John surgery, missed basically 2 full years for that, plus the pandemic, all the other stuff. It seems like we've been waiting around trying to see exactly how, phenom this guy really is for the longest time. And then he even missed some time last year with some stuff where he was kind of just a little banged up. The stuff it's unbelievable. It really is. And the more you get to see it, the more you realize why he's always been, regarded as the special talent. So I applaud the Reds for committing to him first. I don't think it's a pretty team friendly deal, all told. I mean, there's a lot of contracts out there that are very, very similar to this. I think it was a pretty market value deal. I think the Reds would be silly not to have jumped at that opportunity, despite the fact that they've been incredibly austere over the last 2 years. I think he's the first. I think he was the most obvious choice to be that kind of next face of the franchise. And I say that because, we just talked about Votto coming off the books in theory at the end of this year. That's the book. There's nobody else. Nobody else is under contract except for Hunter Greene. So to commit to him first, I think is significant. I also wonder if it's a little bit of a sign of the times, because if you had to ask me the other two players who I really think they should commit to, both starting pitchers also. Nick Lodolo, who pitched today, had a couple rocky starts his last 2 times out against Tampa, who hasn't struggled against Tampa this year. And then also against the Rangers. But first 3 starts of the year dominated the Phillies. 12 Ks, 7 scoreless innings in his second game of that year. Also a former first-round pick, twice been a first-round pick, because he didn't sign with the Pirates when they took him before he went to TCU. Another guy who I think is a prime candidate to be an extension candidate. And then Graham Ashcraft has outpitched both of them so far this year. A guy who, because he was a 6th-round pick and a little bit under the radar also, might actually be the guy the Reds could get on a team-friendly deal. I think he signed for like $250,000 as a signing bonus. So he hasn't gotten a life-changing money the way the other 2 first-round draft picks did on their signing bonuses. I think those are the 3 obvious guys you go to. And if you do that, you're setting yourself up saying, we're a pitching franchise, which, the Reds have never been a pitching franchise. No. Even when they've won, they've always been a hitting franchise. So it's kind of a weird transition in that regard. But I think they've got 3 guys that are worthy of that. And we'll see if the Greene contract was more of the tip of the iceberg than the exception to the rule, I guess.
Yeah, I thought it was a great contract. All right, let's take just a very quick break to pay some bills. And we're back. Again, I'm Chrystal O'Keefe, and I'm here to talk to Wick about all things Reds. So let's start breaking down this series. The White Sox are down bad. They finally beat the Rays after a 10-game losing streak. Pretty embarrassing. There's a lot of injuries. We've got Tim Anderson, who will be back. By the time this series, he comes back for the Twins series. Yohan Moncada is unsure. Andrew Benintendi's. There's a lot of people we're just kind of unsure about right now. So the Reds are doing a little bit better, but do you feel like this might be an evenly matched series?
I would like to think so. Yeah. I think I looked at it earlier. I'm not looking at it right now, but I think I know Lodolo is supposed to pitch. I think is it Ashcraft and Luke Weaver also are supposed to pitch in that series as well. So if you're getting 2 of the Reds' quote unquote big 3, I think the Reds have to believe that for the same reason I think both of them are worthy of extensions in their young careers. The Reds have to feel pretty confident about both of those guys when they're on the mound, despite Lodolo's kind of blip on the radar for a couple of starts as well. They're playing some decent baseball also. It's hard not to argue with that. And they've gotten some guys back that have made a big impact. Part of the reason why I think everybody was kind of down on the Reds this year, A, it was the injuries from last year, but B, it was the injuries from a lot of years before that. And that brings me to Nick Senzel, who was number 2 overall draft pick in 2016. For a long, long time, was the guy who we all were hoping was going to be the next big, product to come out of the Reds system and take off. Hasn't done so. He's gotten moved all over the diamond. He came up as a second baseman, third baseman. They played him in center field. He has been hurt every which way you could possibly be hurt. He's had COVID twice, I think. He's had vertigo before that, torn labrum, broken foot, broken toe, knee injury, you name it. And just staying on the field and getting any sort of consistency has been impossible for him. And that was the case all winter as well. And he missed the start of the season. And I think a lot of people, myself included, kind of wrote him off. The Reds went out and got outfield help in some of the trades. They signed Will Myers. They looked like they had made him kind of redundant all over the diamond, yet he came back and has done nothing but absolutely crush the ball since then. Homered again today, 2 hits, scored 2 runs. They've got him playing hot at the right time, and everybody else is healthy except Joey Votto. So I think they're in a pretty good spot, and Senzel has kind of helped not just round out the lineup offensively because he's hit, but he adds that layer of versatility that I think David Bell wanted to have with this Reds roster. And, they've got lefty starters the last 2 days and have started right-handed hitters in all 9 spots. And they will do it again tomorrow when they're up against Blake Snell in San Diego. But they've also got guys who can play 4 different positions, and they will move them all over the diamond. It's kind of coming together in that platoon, nameless, faceless way that the Reds have built this roster to be. So I think they're figuring that out. Whether or not that's good enough to last, whether or not the bullpen that they didn't spend any money on all offseason can hold out longer than it has. They just put Fernando Cruz on the IL rather yesterday. I don't know. It's a big part of how you win games, and they kind of overlook that. But I think they're in a pretty good spot. So hopefully they come in ready to play, and I don't expect them to be rolled over the way that I have for several series so far this year.
So what are your keys for them to take the series? I mean, obviously starting pitching is incredibly important. Is there anything else you can think of that would really put them on top?
So starting pitching, I think it's key for everybody, obviously, but with the Reds, as I mentioned, with their bullpen, they've got to get deep in games because they just don't have proven arms. I mean, literally look at their bullpen right now, and it's, I mentioned Fernando Cruz. He was a 32-year-old rookie last year, and he's been leaned on pretty heavily so far this season. The rest of it is guys who came in on non-roster deals like Alex Young, Derek Law, who I believe was a minor league signing. They've got waiver claims out there. They've got, I think, 3 pitchers they've already used this year who they themselves designated for assignment. Nobody claimed them. They stayed within the organization, and then they got put back on the active roster later. So they're admittedly, like, they've got some talent. There's a reason why that they're still there, but it's a hodgepodge down there. So doing their best to make sure the bullpen is not asked to win these games is crucial. And whether or not that's the offense jumping at the big leads, or that's the starting pitchers they're depending on getting deep enough into games to turn it over to the right pieces back there. They can't keep depending on this bullpen. Even though it's been pretty reliable-ish so far this year, they've pitched a lot more innings than I think they can sustain down there, and there aren't a whole lot of other arms to cycle up there to replace those guys either.
Yeah, our bullpen is also just atrocious. I mean, we can all look back and laugh now, but Aaron Bummer gave up, 10 runs against the Rays the other night, which was the most, Lance Lynn made it to 7th inning he was going through a no-hitter at the time, and Wander Franco does what he does best and, gets the home run, and then they pull an Aaron Bummer, and that last name is very fitting because, man, that guy frustrates me so much. And, 20 minutes later, because I felt like that 7th inning went on
forever.
They've got 10 runs, and now we are way behind. So, our bullpen isn't great either.
Yeah, the Reds are using Luis Cessa and Luke Weaver both, who, Cessa had been a reliever for the Reds for 2 years. He hadn't been a starter since, I think, 2017 with the Yankees. And that's their number 4 guy. That's going to be the number 5 guy. Luke Weaver was one of the few guys, I think they gave him $2 million guaranteed, over the winter. And his role was kind of undefined, but with all the other parts that have fallen down in the back end of the rotation, he's a guy they're depending on to be a starter. Kansas City didn't even use him as a starter last year. When they got him midseason, he hasn't really been a proven starter. I think he threw 125-ish innings in 2017, 2018 with St. Louis, which is 3 organizations ago. And so that's the back end of the starting rotation. And those are guys that you would have expected to be kind of mid-tier bullpen guys, but that's where the Reds are at this moment. So unfortunately for the White Sox, hopefully, fortunately for the Reds, and Lodolo and Ashcraft, they're getting 2 of the actual proven pitchers that the Reds can roll out there in the same series.
Yeah. I will actually be there for one game in this series because I am a 2-hour drive to Cincinnati, thankfully.
Nice.
So I'm excited to – I mean, I love Great American Ballpark. It is a really fun park.
Ever since the 2015 All-Star game, when they put a lot of money into it, and I think they finished the Banks I think it might have been the year before, or it might have been that same year also. It's become a really, really fun park to go see, that's the most frustrating part about it, is because they've been so just actively bad. It's one thing to play poorly, but it's another thing that, like, you read the tea leaves of the entire offseason and say they don't want to win. It's really turned the crowds there into as sparse as they could possibly be, which is frustrating. And I grew up down the road in Lexington, Kentucky. That's home. That's where all of my family's from. My dad's mom's side of the family was all from Cincinnati, and he obviously grew up a big Reds fan. I haven't lived there in almost 12 years. I've been in Denver ever since then. I miss going to games at Great American. They really are a blast. I think I picked the right city to move to if I didn't want to lose my Reds fandom, because the Rockies have done absolutely nothing to win me over since I've been out here, which is part of the reason why I still follow the Reds as much as I do. But it's the more I've had a chance to be out here. I love Coors Field as well. It's a great spot to see games, but Great American really is. It's a fun, cozy experience. Plus, you sit anywhere in the outfield, I'm sorry, you're going to have 3 or 4 homers fly your way every game also. So
yeah, that's true. It's fun. And I love the museum attached kind of to it with the gift shop. We actually just recently, again, when we were watching the Mets last year, we went into that museum with the kids for the first time, and my son wants to go into sports broadcasting. And so he's sitting there like at the little, the radio booth, and then they're both looking at the teleprompter and kind of recording. And I mean, they had a blast. And I was like, this is your future if this is what you want. And he was like, that museum was just so cool, and that was so much fun. And I mean, they love that ballpark too. They love to just go like sit on the statues, hang out with Johnny Bench,
Yeah. No, it's a tremendous. They do a tremendous job at the Museum and Hall of Fame as well. I need to get back there and go back through it again, because it's been, I think, since 2018 since the last time I went through that. They do a tremendous job with that, and I'm so glad that developed the way that it did. And yeah, it's a cool. I suggest anybody who's listening to this and heading to Great American, factor that into your trip, because it's worth your while. It's obviously it's Reds history, but the Reds have been around for a really long time, so it's every other team's history in there a lot too, and they celebrate that.
And well, at the time I went, the kind of exhibit that they were going through was the history of like Cuban baseball players. So it wasn't just Reds. I mean, obviously when you kind of get upstairs and stuff, it's more Reds, but like that opening floor, they've always got really cool exhibits going through there. And I love the wall of all of the kind of minor league jerseys too. Those are really neat. And then that wall of baseball, like that, it's so cool in there.
It's cool.
Yeah.
It's quite cool. No doubt about it. Yeah.
Yeah. I know a ton of White Sox fans are going to make that trip. So yeah, definitely.
It'll be nice to have Chicago fans that aren't Cubs fans finally flooding that stadium again. So it's that'll be great.
There's always everywhere you go, there's always a Cubs fan. Doesn't matter what team's playing.
Without fail.
Be a Cubs fan. Oh, so let's move on for kind of your general thoughts for this season. I mentioned, who might go all the way, who might be the underdog, or what team is, that you thought should be kind of shining right now is just really bad.
So before the season, I picked the Toronto Blue Jays to win the World Series. I do five dumb predictions for the Reds and for the entire Major League season. Call them dumb. It's my get out of jail free card for when they inevitably sound dumb much later. Picking the Blue Jays to win the World Series might be my smartest one so far. I just think it's a club that, for all the good pieces that they already have, it's a club with ambition, and I think that means a lot in today's modern game. The way the teams approach things and how much happens at the deadline. I expect them to be incredibly active with whatever it is they need to get. And I think they look up and realize that while the American League East is still a beast in Tampa, I think they thought Tampa was going to be good. I don't think they thought they'd start as well as they have this year. But I think they thought that Boston was a little bit down. Baltimore might be a pitcher or two away. And the Yankees, while good, they're not peak Yankees right now, I don't think. And I think they saw a chance to capitalize on that, and they've got a really good roster together. So I'm going to stick with that one. I think Toronto's my team to beat for the season. It's hard not to look at what San Diego did and not just like drool at that a little bit also. So I picked them to be in the World Series from the National League. They obviously haven't gotten off to the best of starts yet, and they've got the juggernaut Cincinnati Reds coming to town for 3 games tomorrow, so they might get a little further in the hole before they make their climb. That's the one I'm a little bit more skeptical on. I do anticipate them continuing to be absurdly aggressive if they need to. They've shown no stopping that so far, but I just don't know exactly what other piece they can turn to without making good expensive players they've committed to being somewhat redundant, and I don't know if they'll go that far. But yeah, it's been a very interesting April. There've been a lot of teams that I expected to play better. Chicago, for one, I thought I didn't expect them to be great this year,
not that bad.
but not as bad as they've been. And obviously injuries. You take Tim Anderson and put him on the side. That's a big part of not just the numbers of the lineup, but also the mentality of the team and just how they play. And that's an injury that just crushes things. So hopefully they will be better going forward. But I also still try to temper my expectations for every team through the month of April and see how things play out. Going back to the Nationals of 2019, and they were 19-32 before going on to win the World Series.
Yeah.
A lot of baseball left to be played out there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, again, Wick, thank you so much for coming on. Here's your chance to, plug your socials and let everybody know where to find you.
Walks Haunt FFSN is technically the Twitter handle for our podcast, which we have not really leaned into just yet. We're getting that fired back up. Follow us at Red Reporter for the time being. That's kind of where you'll find most of our stuff shared as we try to begin to build our audience with the podcast back. You can follow me at Wick Terrell if you want to. It's a lot of baseball stuff and a lot of dumber stuff as well, which I try to moderate that and bridge the gap at least a little bit. But definitely read our stuff at redreporter.com. We're doing our best to stay focused on covering the big league team, especially since they've been better so far this season than we started. But now that the rest of the farm system is healthy and we've got a top 3 or 4 farm system in the game right now after trading away all the names that you used to know that played for the Cincinnati Reds elsewhere, we've got half of Seattle's system and half of the Twins system right now. As minor leagues really begin to heat up, we're looking forward to focusing a lot of our coverage over there on that. Also, we're firing up a second podcast about the Reds minor leagues that should be getting started at some point in early May as well. So follow us on the suggested spots I mentioned earlier, and you will get more information on that and what Ellie De La Cruz and Christine Encarnacion Strand are up to at AAA Louisville. So.
Yeah, you're the Bats, right?
We are the Bats, the Louisville Bats. Yeah, the Reds.
That's a fun stadium.
Louisville's a fun city.
Yeah,
I'm biased. I've got some family up there. It's a really, really fun city, but they've committed a lot to making that part of town and the stadium itself there. And much like with the Reds, you've got the actual Bats factory and museum right there also, which is a super fun thing to go check out. So yeah, if you're a fan of the International League Baseball and AAA baseball, make a trip down to Louisville, ideally in May, because by June, that lineup might be a lot different than it is right now. But it's a fun club to go check out in a fun stadium.
Yeah, it is. And go to the Slugger Museum. That place is so much fun, too. All right. Well, thank you so much. Best of luck to you in this series. And let's just hope Joey Votto comes back soon.
Sooner than later, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.